Oh, snappy. I like that. Hour number 2 of OverDrive. Jim, Tatti, and Dave Feschuk with you today and again tomorrow. We've been renewed for another 24 hours.
Well, let's not speak too soon. We've got a
I'm
couple hours
coming
to
back.
go.
I don't care.
Okay.
I don't care who's in the chair. I'm going to elbow them out.
There you go.
I've been renewed.
I like that confidence.
Yeah, well, it's done, right? It's an agreement. It's agreement in principle, and it's going to happen.
Okay.
There you go.
I'll be with you. I'm right here. I'm right behind you.
Absolutely. OverDrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Coming up very shortly, Martin Biron, and we'll go over the Samsonov deal, among other things, where this could go. And again, the arbitration day is set for next Friday, which means as they're walking up the steps, is probably the last chance where somebody could agree to something. And once you go in those doors, then the process begins and you can't walk out. And this could be a take it or leave it situation. But they're not going to get there.
I wouldn't think so. You'd be shocked if they got to arbitration with a guy they clearly want. And by the way, they need.
Yes.
They need him. They don't have a lot of other options here.
I just think it's interesting when you go over, we talked about that going into the top of the hour, the length of contracts, how that's changed, not just here, but across the league. And of course, driven by a tight cap. So the economics changed that. I think most times you're looking at 3 and 4 years, sometimes 5, rarely 7 and 8, just because of the enormous commitment and how the economy in the league can change over that period of time.
Well, I'm looking at, just talking about goalie signings, though, I'm looking at all the signings that have happened since July 1 this year right now, Jim, and it's a long list. It's like, a couple dozen at least. I'm not counting every one, but the vast majority of them are 1 and 2 year deals.
Yeah.
You have your outliers. You got your Ilya Sorokin, 8-year deal at 8.25.
That's a re-sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously a guy who's established himself as awfully elite. And you've got the Korpisalo deal, which I think stood out because Ottawa gave him a 5-year term on a $4 million AAV. But you don't see a lot of that. I mean, Tristan Jarry got a 5-year deal at 5.3. But like Freddie Anderson signed 2-year deal with Carolina to stay on, not at an overwhelming number. I mean, you're looking at $3.4 million AAV for Freddie.
Yeah.
So that's what you'd like if you're the Leafs.
I think,
a deal in that range.
The attraction for me would be to play on a team where you could evolve and look good, as opposed to a team where you couldn't. I mean, you know that going in. I think he knows what he's going to get with the Leafs, and that's a positive situation. Joining us now on the Maple Toyota Hotline is Martin Biron. Marty, welcome. How are you today, sir?
I am doing really good. I was listening to you guys in the first hour. Loved the tennis talk because I have been keeping a close eye on the Wimbledon tournament. And, so there was some good tennis today. It'll be even better tomorrow. And I love that that's taking center stage right now in the summertime.
Yeah, it's a great event. I mean, this is a classic event with all kinds of tradition. It's just, if you're ever in London, it's like visiting the Home Office. I mean, everything's original there. So we want to get into the Samsonov situation and just to figure out, I don't know if you have a comparable for him, but to figure out, what are the tricky numbers, the term or the dollar figure, and where do you think this thing goes?
Well, I mean, this is where I think it goes. Obviously, the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to have to find some money to satisfy Samsonov in a certain way. Like, I understand there's arbitration and all of that, but I think the Leafs have Joseph Woll, and he's a really good young prospect. But before you can really know what you have in Joe Woll, like, is it 2 years, 3 years at the NHL level before you know? So what are you going to do for the next 2-3 years when you have Marner and Matthews and Tavares and Morgan Riley and Nylander? And you got to get somebody that at least can give you consistent play. And I thought Samsonov did that last year. Now, is he, in my opinion, a $6 million goalie? No. But I don't think he's a $3.5 million goalie either. So you got to go in between there. But are the Leafs willing to pay $5 a year for the next 3-4 years for Samsonov? I think that's the $1 million question. I'm not sure that there's any better options out there. That's the problem. Like, I look at all 32 teams and their goaltenders. There's really no options out there for the Leafs other than trying to make it work with their goalie and roll the dice and hope that it works well.
That's an interesting picture you painted there, Marty. So you're saying in a lot of ways the Maple Leafs maybe in some ways forced to give him a little more than they'd like because they don't have a ton of other options.
Yeah, I mean, look, are you going to go Connor Hellebuck? Absolutely not. Like you're even at $6 million next year, Connor Hellebuck. That's a really, really good value contract, but he's not going anywhere if he doesn't have the extension. And to me, that is going to cost way too much money. There's been rumor that it's, he wants $9 million a year. Look, he's not going to get $9 million a year, but even $8 million a year for a goalie that's going to be 31 years old at that point that wants a 7 or 8 year extension, that's too much money.
Mm-hmm.
John Gibson, look, John Gibson. Everybody, well, not everybody, but most people have raved over the fact that John Gibson has been the one, maybe only, constant thing for the Ducks over the last few years. Yes, you have Trevor Zegras now, and you've got, some up and comers, but John Gibson has had to do a lot on himself. Now, I've never been a big Gibson fan. I think his game's too stiff. I think it looked good on a bad team, but you put him on a good team, and I think it's not going to be much better. So I've not been a Gibson fan, but are you making that move? Are you looking at trading assets to try to get John Gibson, despite the fact that maybe Anaheim is going to have to eat some money or whatnot? I wouldn't do it. I think Samsonov is probably their better option, but there's not anything that would rock my boat. And I think they were in the same situation last year.
Right.
When they walked away from Jack Campbell and, they had to go Samsonov Murray. Like, I feel like the Leafs made a decision a couple of years back when they decided to part way with Freddie Anderson. Freddie Anderson, in my opinion, is still a top-tier goaltender, a top, 10, top 15 goaltender in the league. Was that the mistake? Was that the mistake that now you keep paying year after year and you keep, having a bit of an unknown in that situation?
You mentioned $5 million, and so here's the tricky part of this, and I'd like your reaction to it. Is he's an RFA for one more year, and then he goes into those UFA years. So I guess the ultimate question is, as you cough up UFA years, what's it worth? So you feel that that's worth around $5. Most people I've talked to have it in the low $4s, but I sort of agree with what you're saying.
Well, here's the thing. I follow this guy on Twitter. He's from Rochester, New York. We had him on our show in Buffalo, and he's with AFP Analytics, and they do tax preparation for athletes and not just hockey players, but many athletes. And then they went into the projection field, and they project contracts, and they've been pretty good this year when you look at numbers that where they add the projection and where the players have signed. But the tendency for the higher-end players has been to get about $500,000 to $1 million more than what the projections were. Because one domino falls, and then everybody can get on that wave, right? Like the defense waves, when Damon Severson signed and then got traded out of Jersey and all of that, you're thinking, wow, that was a lot of money. But, yeah, okay, well, now everybody rides that train. Well, another way to have leverage in negotiations is there's nobody else out there. Or I'm going to go to arbitration. I'll get a 1 year contract, and then after that, I'll be a UFA. So what are you going to do about it, right? Like if the Leafs let Samsonov walk to UFA next year, are they in a better, same, or worse place than they are right now? I would think that they may be in the worst place just because we don't know what you have really at the NHL level with Joseph Woll. I think he's a great goaltender, but it's still a bit early to tell. So maybe they're willing to roll the dice. Maybe Brett Treliving is saying, hey, go to arbitration, get a 1 year deal, and then by Christmas we'll know what we have out of Joseph Woll. Maybe we re-sign Samsonov long term on January 1, or maybe we just let the contract run out and we have a young goaltender for the future that could start in a year from now. Like that. That's what you have to come up to inside the hockey department and conversation. You have to make a decision that way.
Marty, you look at, obviously, the Matt Murray experiment didn't go the way the Maple Leafs hoped it would this season. They hoped that his playoff experience as a two-time Cup winner would come through for them when it mattered in the playoffs. And, of course, he turned out not to be available when it mattered, or certainly wasn't leaned on when it mattered. They still got him on the books for $4.7 million this year. There's all there's talks of potential for buyout, potential they might be able to trade him. I mean, Do you think there's any value in Matt Murray, or is the fact that he has, he's so far away from being that Stanley Cup winner that maybe his time has run out in this league?
Yeah, I think he's very far away from being that Stanley Cup winner. And when he did it obviously with a safety net. That was Marc-Andre Fleury, right? And then look, I've been in those shoes where you're playing with house money, everything feels good, and then all of a sudden you get pressure. You have to react to the pressure, and if you're injured, and if you start dealing with, head injuries and lower body injuries, and it's lingering, now you have more and more pressure on you to perform. Now you have millions of dollars in play. You sign a big contract, you get traded. You're adding all that pressure on top. And I think that right now Matt Murray is bursting at the seam with all this pressure, and his lack of production is adding on to it. So, I didn't think that Murray was going to be a big player last summer when the Maple Leafs got him. I thought, look, if anything, maybe he gets some stability. Maybe, Samsonov has more upside. And I think we saw this year that Samsonov did have more upside and was able to play a big role. But if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs right now and you're looking at Matt Murray, like a buyout to me is the only option. Like I know it's not easy buying out a contract, especially somebody that was injured at the end of the season. And then you're saying, look, we know you've had injuries, but see you, dude. Like we're gonna, pay you 2/3 of your money over the next 2 years, and that's it. But for the Leafs, the cap hit would be $680,000 this year. Now, in 2 years, it would be $2 million. I understand that. But if the cap goes up in a couple of years, you don't have to pay him 4.6 this year. Like, I think you're buying yourself some time. You're punting the problem in 12 months down the road instead of having the problems right now.
Well, and as they've seen in the past, when you trade that contract out, you have to put a sweetener in the deal, and I don't know if they want to do that. It makes more sense to buy him out, doesn't it?
I think so. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to, retain 50% of that salary, and then, you trade him, so you're going to retain, $2.3 million this year. Well, it's kind of the same thing as doing it in 2 years down the road, but the cap most likely will go up. So now it's not as big of a percentage of the cap eating it this year as opposed to eating it in 2 years down the road. The other thing, too, is, the teams that are, keeping money or taking contracts and bad contracts, there's fewer and fewer of them. The reason is because you can only, have 3 retained money. So if you take 1 and 2 already, you may not want to, buy in the third one. Then money on the cap, well, that doesn't look good anymore. Even Arizona, who's now saying we're building a team. Like they used to be the team, like let's call Arizona. They'll take some money, right? They'll take a draft pick or something. They're not doing that anymore. So who else is going to do it? Chicago's not going to do it. Chicago's got Connor Bedard. They don't want to, say we're waving the white flag right now. They want to put a good front out. So I don't think there's anybody that would really do it.
Marty, it's always good to get your take on the Maple Leafs because you're not living it every day like we do here. What have you made of the moves Brad Treliving is pulled off so far? There are more shoes to drop, we all assume, but the 1-year deals to Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, John Klingberg, the 3-year deal to Ryan Reeves. What's your sort of top contour takeaway on those?
Again, I think that what Brad Treliving and Brendan Shannon are doing are saying we're focusing on next year. How can we make the best out of the situations that we have next year? And I think that may come into play with Matt Murray. That may come into play with Ilya Samsonov because that came into play with Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, and John Klingberg, just like you pointed out. I thought that was fantastic. Look, I'm based out of Buffalo. I cover the Sabres full time, but I love the league. I watch every team. I study every team. And when I see the Leafs on July 2nd and do what they did, I'm like, well, darn it. Like they're gonna be good again. And if you're the Sabres and their fans, they're like, hey, we need teams in the Atlantic to fall off so that, we can go up. If you're the Ottawa Senators, you're like, we need teams in the Atlantic to fall off so we can go up. And if you're Detroit, you need the same thing. But because they got Bertuzzi on a 1-year deal, I thought that was brilliant. Look, most players are in the same situation. They may not be able to get the full value that they thought they were going to get because of the cap crunch this year. But they're kicking the problems down next year. And they're saying, well, next year there may be some more money available. Let's punt it down a year. So I think that what they did was fantastic. Bertuzzi, Domi, Klingberg, like you're adding on to that. Now, the one thing that I still think should be on the priority list of Brett Treliving is I don't see how you can still go in, and I know he hasn't been around for the last 5-6 years with the Leafs, but how do you go in with Marner, Matthews, Tavares, Nylander, Riley, right? Those five. Mm-hmm. I know you've got the same coach and everything, so I feel like you got to move one of them. And obviously the candidate for me is William Nylander. You're never going to get him at a higher value than what you got out of him last year with the goals, the fact that he's on his last year of his deal. A team could extend him for an 8-year deal. He's 27. I think that's the next piece. And I don't think they're going to do it. But if it was me in that position, I would be working really hard at the Nylander situation and potentially making that trade.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, you have to send out some salary and take back less. If you could move a winger and a defenseman and bring back some edge, physical edge in that blue line and a lesser paid winger, I mean, these are all components to get under the cap, which they have to do.
They do have to do it. Look, the 10% rule in the summertime is great. So anybody can go up over $8.5 million over the cap this summer, and that's great. But when the season starts, you got to be able to shed that money. Now, I understand you may be able to use long-term IR, and maybe the Leafs start with 20 players on the roster. Look, I mean, it's easy to call up somebody from the Marlies, right? It's right down the road. Absolutely, they did last year. So maybe to become compliant, you're going to need to be at 20 players to start the season. But that's never the situation that teams want to find themselves in. So, I would think if you're able to trade the Willie Nylander $6.9 million cap hit, then you would be pretty much at the cap. Now, I know you'd probably take a little bit of money in, a player or something, but it wouldn't be much. I think you would have to do that absolutely this summer to make sure that you're cap compliant at the end of training camp.
Yeah, well, it may come to that, Marty, given that Nylander has a history of playing hardball in negotiations, and the Maple Leafs are at a point where they maybe not be able to pony up that kind of money at this stage. So let's go to the Sabres. I mean, Marty, the Sabres finish 1 point in the standings behind a team called the Florida Panthers that end up making it to the Stanley Cup final. Sabres missed the playoffs, of course. How close are they to becoming a playoff contender? As much as you talk about somebody's got to fall off in the Atlantic, you got to believe Buffalo's on the come up.
Yeah, Buffalo is on the come up, and at the end of the season, they had a maybe 75%, 80% Tage Thompson. He was dealing with an upper body injury, slowed him down. He was on pace for well over 50 goals, did not get there, but this is a guy next year that could get to 50. He's got the shot out of anybody. And you talk about one-timers, we're going to talk Ovechkin and Steven Stamkos and wrist shot is, Austin Matthews. But Tage Thompson last season scored more goals over 100 miles an hour than anybody else in the National Hockey League. He could shoot the puck. He's got that one-timer. He's got that great wrist shot. He's got the reach. He's got the skills. He's really good. And on a line with Skinner and Tuch, that line was really good. Now, the second line for the Sabres, which I was really excited to see, is Dylan Cousins in the middle. Those that have followed Canadian juniors, World Juniors, the World Championship, Dylan Cousins has always been fantastic, and he's really good down the middle. And it was going to be with J.J. Peterka and Jack Quinn. Unfortunately, Jack Quinn is going to be out until almost Christmas now with an Achilles tendon injury that he had to get surgically repaired a couple of weeks ago. We found out when we were at the draft that just had happened. So that's unfortunate because Jack Quinn in his second year was primed for a breakout season. But you still have Victor Olofsson, which many thought was going to get traded this summer. So maybe he steps up in that role. Dahlin, Power, Samuelson, they had Connor Clifton on the blue line. They had Eric Johnson. The only question mark really is, well, who's in net, right? Like, are you going to – I think Devin Levi is the front runner. And, again, those that have followed the World Juniors and Devin Levi's career and what he did at the end of the season last year, he's the front runner. But this is a team that's primed to get in. So you're rolling the dice a little bit with goaltenders, but they're hoping that the team in front is better than last year so that it insulates the goalies a little bit more. But for me, Devin Levi is the guy, and we'll see what happens in camp.
Okay, so to sort of wrap up the Atlantic Division talk, I mean, you're talking Buffalo. Ottawa has traded DeBrincat and will probably sign another goal scorer. And then Detroit's done a lot of stuff, a lot of offseason signings. So of that three-headed monster, Buffalo, Ottawa, and Detroit, who sort of rises above everything?
I think Buffalo is ahead of everybody with a close second in Ottawa. And Detroit, I don't like what Detroit did. I know they brought in a lot of pieces, but I don't think it moves the needle enough, right? I think they lost Tyler Bertuzzi last year. They need more internally, but I don't think that what Detroit did moves the needle enough. So I think Ottawa and Buffalo are knocking at the door. I think for me, I mean, Florida Panthers are primed to be the team to come out, right? And I understand that's, without Ekblad, without Montour to start the season, they did go all the way to the finals last year, but they just made the playoffs barely over Buffalo and Pittsburgh, like you said. So I think Florida is primed to come out. And in the Atlantic, the Boston Bruins, to me, are a team that may be primed to have a not so great season like they did last year. Like, depending on what happens with Bergeron and Krejci, obviously, that could change things around. But if there's no Bergeron, no Krejci, they weren't able to keep Orlov. They don't have Connor Clifton. They didn't keep Tyler Bertuzzi. They don't have Taylor Hall. Like, I feel that Boston could take a tumble. So Ottawa and Buffalo, set your sight on Florida and Boston in the Atlantic. That's the way I would do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You talk about Detroit. I mean, it's funny how, Steve Yzerman was widely considered maybe the best general manager in the business when he was building Tampa. Marty, from your perspective, I mean, what's kind of, held that team back in terms of trying to raise it from the ashes? He did not inherit a great team, but it's been tough sledding trying to make it better for Stevie Y in Detroit.
Well, I think when you look at the players that they have, they've not developed a lot of players, and maybe some of them look good at first, and then they didn't really keep going. Mo Seider is fantastic on defense. There's a guy that you can say, hey, you know what? We've developed Mo Seider, and he's fantastic. Okay, but Lucas Raymond had a really good rookie campaign, and then it just was okay, right? And there's not a lot of players. I look at Dylan Larkin, fantastic, but he's also 26 years old now. There needs to be another wave of young players that you develop that are going to come through. Instead, you trade for DeBrincat, you sign Andrew Kopp, you sign JT Compher, you have David Perron again, Klim Kostin, Daniel Sprong, Christian Fischer. Like, where are the guys that you developed? They're not there. Detroit doesn't have those guys enough. They don't have enough of those guys to say that we are taking the steps forward. Like Ottawa, they have Kachuk, and they have Norris, and they have Patterson, and they have Shabbat, and they have Sanderson, and they have those guys. Like, okay, Buffalo, same thing. Detroit doesn't have those guys. That's the problem there.
Marty, thanks for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope everybody else did.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed talking to you guys. Have a great rest of the summer, and call me anytime. I'll have my computer ready, and we can talk more hockey if you want.
Okay, talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Marty.
Yeah. Thanks.
Marty Biron joined us on the Maple Toyota hotline. Build your next dream Toyota at Maple Toyota. And Guy, check out Maple Toyota's pre-owned inventory arriving daily. Yes, Guy, it's time to Toyota. Visit mapletoyota.com. He's put a lot of stuff out there. I like so go to arbitration, get a 1-year deal. I never really considered that. Have you?
No. Didn't seem like, Marty would know better than we would about the goalie market and what's possible, but it's an interesting wrinkle that we hadn't considered.
Yeah, we'll discuss that later on. We have to make room because the lawyers have signed off. Yes Guy, No Guy is next. Oh, Yes Guy. OverDrive grinding on a Thursday. Jim, Tatti, and Dave Feschuk with you. Time now for my favorite game.
Yes Guy, No Guy.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, drivers and passengers, time now for the fully sanctioned use of Yes Guy, No Guy on OverDrive. It doesn't happen often, but it's happening now. Grappler, go ahead, sir.
Well, hold on. I was expecting some big sponsor read. Like, what
Oh, guy, that's
Come on, unbelievable. What are we doing here?
That's how you get to use it. There's no money involved. If there was,
we wouldn't be doing it.
That's correct.
All right, fair enough. Okay, yes guy, no guy number one. Shohei Ohtani, obviously the talk of baseball, is dealt before the MLB trade deadline.
I'm a yes guy. I know there's been talk that Artie Moreno, the owner in Anaheim, doesn't want to be the guy that traded Shohei Ohtani, the greatest talent that we have ever seen play this game. But I got to think that once he thinks this through, he's not going to want to be the guy that didn't trade Shohei Ohtani and let him walk for nothing in free agency, and instead was the guy that captured many assets back to the team that is lucky enough to acquire Shohei Ohtani for a playoff run. So I got to believe they're going to deal him.
I'm going to say yes, guy, as well. I think this is a story that is about to blow up in terms of what this guy becomes. I mean, obviously, everybody's thrilled that he can pitch and play everyday baseball as well at the same time, which Babe Ruth did for, I think, a year and a half, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But this is, I mean, if you watch the Nike movie and the shoe movie, think of Michael Jordan and the shoe and where that went.
Yep.
I had some stats thrown at me the other day that this is like hundreds of billions of dollars a year now, and his 5% is like 30 or 40 million a year. On the Jordan story, don't you think that this Ohtani story is about to reach its version of that, and there's no way to control it, so you have to liquidate and get what you can?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, to me, it's, he's going to leave in free agency. He's talked about how he's tired of losing. The Angels do nothing but lose. They need so much more to become the playoff contender that they want to be. And now with, Mike Trout hurt, that does not help matters. So it seems to me like it's a no-brainer that he's leaving. I think Buster Olney put it out there that what is his next contract going to start with? Is it a 4, a 5, a 6, or a 7, or some such? Like $700 million is being discussed, is what I'm saying here. So yeah, get what you can now, move on, because guess what? You'll be able to get a lot for Shohei Ohtani down the stretch.
Just one quick thing though, just to disagree there, Dave. Like, if he's going to be leaving in the offseason anyways, I mean, teams might maybe teams don't want to trade for him because it's like, okay, if this guy's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, why would I trade away a bunch of assets for someone I can just sign in the offseason anyways?
Because you're trying to win the World Series this year.
Yeah, and
Very
if it's the right market for that business side of the story that I said, meaning if it's New York, Chicago, or LA, they're going to find a way to make that work.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes guy, no guy number 2. Matt Dumba, one of the many remaining free agents on the NHL market, would be a good fit on the Maple Leafs blue line.
I'm going to say yes, guy. He adds some grit. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do back there, but they can't go as is right now. They have to do something, and he would be a good fit, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a yes guy on that. I think, obviously it depends on time. He's still relatively young, age 28. We know he has that physicality. We know that, he is something they lack right now with the since you lost Lyubushkin and now you've lost Shen, you really need somebody that can hit somebody back there. And I think Matt Dumba definitely qualifies as somebody that can do that. So maybe not the ideal fit, but a fit. Yes, guy.
Yeah, that seems like one of those guys, like former first-round pick, obviously, had some quality years with the Wild, but the last couple of years, I do feel as though he's kind of plateaued a bit. So I think kind of like you said, Dave, would be a good fit, but, how much are you going to pay him? So, yeah, obviously named to track over the next few weeks. Yes guy, no guy number 3. LeBron James obviously made a big announcement at the ESPYs last night. Not that I think anybody was surprised by this, but LeBron will be returning for yet another NBA season. So, yes guy, no guy. LeBron James plays at least 3 more seasons in the NBA.
Ooh. I'm going to say no guy.
Okay.
Because it's his line about how he can't cheat the game. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but he's going to play a game one night and he's not going to be happy. He won't be able to live up to himself is what I'm trying to say. And I don't know when that is, but I think 3 years is a pretty good window.
I'm going to say yes guy. I'm going to say he's going to make it. I think he's going to play deep. I mean, I know he had the cliffhanger, said he had a lot to think about after the season ended. But this is a guy who at age, 38 right now? He'll turn 39 in December. Look at his numbers this year. I mean, the guy averaged...
Father Time is undefeated.
No, 20. I understand that. But He's 38 years old, about to turn 39, and he averaged 29 points a game, albeit only playing 54 or 55 games this season due to various injuries and load management. But
So, I mean, if he had to play, if he had that allotment over the next 3 years, don't you think he would come to the conclusion that I can't be myself because I'm not playing enough?
see, I heard his agent, Rich Paul, talking on NBA radio this morning. I think it was with Frank Isola and the fellas. And, his thing was, look, this guy, don't underestimate him. Let's not pretend that we know how this guy is going to react as time moves on. Because guess what? You say Father Time is undefeated, but Father Time has not been pressed like this in basketball.
He's going to get a fight.
Yeah, he's getting a heck of a fight from LeBron James, a fight that we haven't seen before. And as much as, look, it's about motivation, as Rich Paul said, because he's got the all-time scoring record. He's got the championships. He's got so many records. He's probably not going to get to 7 championships and top Michael Jordan. So what is the motivation for him to there's the playing with the son, Ronnie Jr. and there's just playing in general past 40, which has rarely been done in the NBA and certainly never at a high level. I think there's a lot for him to play for here.
I don't disagree with that. I just don't think he's going to get there.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important for LeBron, too, like, you got to give him credit, in this era of load management. You mentioned how many games did he play this year? 56?
Yeah.
Like, this is a guy who he's not about load management. Like, if he's healthy, he's generally been able to play. So I think something that he's wanting to play for is as he gets, into his later 30s, into his 40s. I mean, how cool would it be for someone at 41 years old to find a way to play, 80 games of an 82-game season?
Wow.
Like, with all the titles he's won, maybe that's what it's about, just like longevity as he continues to get older. But, yeah, like everything with LeBron, obviously something we'll have our eyes on. So moving on, yes guy, no guy number 4. Bo Bichette signs a long-term deal with the Jays before his current contract expires at the end of the 2025 season.
I got to say yes guy to that. I mean, they got to take care of business. I don't know why they would let that drift.
Yeah, that's a question I'm a yes guy as well. I think this is a no-brainer. And I'm with Steve Phillips, who was on the show earlier this week talking about how it alarms him that they've let this languish as long as they have. And most teams don't do this, right? And there's strategic reasons to do what they're doing. There's definitely validity to it. And you can certainly make an argument that they're in calm and safe waters. But we also had Brett Boone on yesterday, and Brett's point was teams that let it go this long often lose these guys.
Sure.
Because, as we pointed out earlier in the show, they only get more expensive as they build up their track record and their career resume and their experience. So Bo Bichette's only getting more expensive after, in the middle of another All-Star season where he's been, your MVP, at least not on the pitching mound. I don't know why they've let it go this long, but they better get it done before this contract's up.
Yeah, and I think one thing we have to consider as well is that, not that Bo doesn't, love being in Toronto, love being a Blue Jay. He's got no connection up here. Like, I'm pretty sure his family lives down in Florida. He just strikes me as a, southern U.S. guy. Maybe he wants to be out on the West Coast. You just wonder if he gets further, as he gets further in his career, he just kind of realizes, maybe I don't want to be playing for the one Canadian team.
Yeah.
But that would obviously be bad news for the Jays and not something we have to worry about for hopefully at least another few seasons. So moving on, yes guy, no guy, number 5. Pascal Siakam is on the Raptors opening night roster.
I'm going to say yes guy. It's just, when you go through all those trade possibilities, it's kind of messy.
Yeah.
I don't know how you make that work for the roster without admitting that you're in sort of a rebuild, and I don't know that they want to go there. I just think it's better to have him.
I'm a yes guy, too. As much as I think they do well to trade him, we've seen how difficult it is to trade him, especially when you look at the track record of Masai Ujiri and the way he values his own assets versus the way he values other people's assets. We've speculated on trades. We speculated on a trade that might move Fred Van Vliet out of town at the trade deadline. That didn't happen. We speculated on how many trades that would have moved Kyle Lowry out of town at various points in his tenure. None of those happened. We've speculated on all kinds of trades with Masai Ujiri, and they just haven't happened outside of the big one, the DeMar DeRozan Kawhi Leonard trade, which nobody saw coming and nobody predicted. So if I'm predicting whether or not Masai Ujiri is going to trade, I'm generally saying no guy.
Yeah.
But yes guy to Pascal Siakam being on the opening night lineup.
Now, could you not see a world where, say, Siakam sticks around through this offseason, starts here on the opening, starts the opening night of the season here? If the Raptors are like a bottom 5 team in the NBA and Siakam's still kicking around, like, do you think that, by all accounts, it sounds as though Siakam wants to remain here, but obviously, a lot of time has to pass between now and the time that's going to happen. Could you not see a scenario where maybe Masai learns from his mistake last year of not unloading Van Vliet and ended up, getting nothing for him as he signs with the Rockets, and maybe thinking, okay, let's try and get something for this guy before he potentially walks in the summer?
I don't think it's the same thing. I mean, he's already at $37 million.
Yeah.
So I think there's an easier agreement there. The gap with Freddie was substantial.
I think if that happens, Grappler, like if they're bottom 5 in the league, then Masai Ujiri will have grossly miscalculated what this team is about. Because what they're going to be pushing when the season begins, and they do that, beginning of the season press conference, is a whole new atmosphere, a new coach, a new vision, a new kind of sunniness,
culture.
A new
we
culture.
love that word, culture.
Yeah. They're essentially blaming Nick Nurse for a lot of their problems here. They're saying that he drove the starters into the ground. He didn't give the guys on the bench a chance. The mood around the team wasn't right. When they had to deal with Scotty Barnes, not performing to expectation, who had to fly into town and talk to him because Nick Nurse couldn't handle it? It was Masai Ujiri that had to give him that, early season pep talk when he was flagging out of the gate. So they're blaming a lot on Nick Nurse, whether they want to admit it or not. And they're saying that Coach Darko is going to bring this new culture. And if they're bottom 5 after doing all that, and these guys off the bench turn out to be the stiffs that many of us think they are, then they got a bigger problems than just trading Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, can't disagree with any of that.
He went to the stiff word, stiffs.
we made it an hour and 40 minutes without stiff on this show, so a little more than halfway.
Somewhere O-Dog is chuckling.
All right, yes guy, no guy. Victor Wembanyama and Connor Bedard win at least 2 MVP awards throughout their career.
Oh, yes, guy. That's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? I mean, the story would be if they didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 is not easy. I mean, it's hard to win multiple MVPs in the NBA. And this guy's a long way from MVP, judging from his one good game in the Summer League, albeit that's a fairly small sample size. So I'd say I'm a no guy on this.
Really?
I don't think it's as easy as we're making it sound. It's always
the question was not easy.
2 each.
Yeah, 2 each.
I mean, look.
Number 1 draft picks. I mean, I think that should be an automatic expectation.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but you look at it like Hart Trophy winners. Like how many multiple Hart? Like Austin Matthews is 7 years into his career. He was a consensus number 1 overall pick. He's a goal scorer supreme. He's got 1 Hart Trophy 7 years in. Right? It's not easy to win Hart trophies. Just coming.
Connor McDavid.
Yeah, McDavid's won his 3rd now. So it's I'm a no guy on this. What do you think, Raps?
I could see Bedard. It's tough because the thing is, as amazing as these guys are, there's competitors that are just as good as they are, but you never know how healthy they're going to remain. You never know when else other players throughout the NHL, through the NBA, are having career years. Marketability and how the team is performing is obviously a big part of it. If Wembanyama is putting up these massive years, or Connor Bedard is putting up these massive years, and the Blackhawks and the Spurs are just these awful teams, I mean, how many MVPs are they going to win? But that also leads to, how long are they going to stick around with the teams that drafted them? But that's a, completely absurd conversation for, for 2 guys who haven't even started their careers yet. I'd lean yes guy. I'm leaning yes guy because I hope yes guy.
Yeah.
You see Wembanyama, you see Bedard. Obviously, they're amazing talents, and you want to see them do well. You don't want them to turn into the Greg Odens, the Neil Yakupovs, the Andrea Bargnanis of the world. You'd obviously prefer they end up being the Tim Duncans of the world and the Connor McDavids of the world.
Yeah. I like the names you trotted out there.
I mean, I was just looking it up. So there's been 16 guys that have won 2 or more NBA MVPs. So 16 guys in the history of the league have got 2 or more. And Jokic obviously is the latest. And there's 19 or 20 that have won 2 or more Hart trophies. But McDavid just got to number 3, and he's well on his way. There's a lot. It's not easy to do, man.
Those are 2 pretty dynamic number 1 overall picks.
They are,
and
but
that creates the optimism. Well, they haven't played yet, so
that's what I mean.
Yeah, that's where we're at is the projection And if you didn't have that kind of a projection based on where they were selected, those would be bad selections at this point.
They would be.
Yeah.
And look, I have a feeling that Wembanyama might have a better chance of doing it than Bedard because, but who knows? I mean, like people are talking about, Victor as the greatest prospect since LeBron, which would tell you that, 2 MVPs should be doable. But for Bedard, I think Matthews is a good comparable. Just because you're a great goal scorer doesn't mean you're going to win the MVP every year. Because guess what? McDavid doesn't go anywhere for the first 7 years
not
of
a great
career,
team.
maybe. What's that?
Chicago, not a great team.
Well, that's the other thing.
That's a mess.
How bad? That's a great point too. How many years is it going to be before he'll even be considered for a Hart Trophy? Because you're not winning a Hart Trophy on a bottom-feeding team.
Well,
even if you are a great player.
They brought in a lot of veterans to insulate them, but you don't win that trophy by yourself.
No, you certainly don't.
I almost talked myself out of a yes guy. Almost.
You were close.
I was. We should break then. You've got some we can save for the next hour, right?
Yeah, I got a couple more, but let's save those for a little yes guy, no guy after dark.
Let me check. Yeah, you're okay. You can use it.
We're going to use it anyways.
I had to check.
I would have turned your mic off.
No, it's lawyers listening, so there you go. Okay, so we come back and we got plenty of stuff to talk about. Marty Biron dropped a couple of nice blossoms there that we can go over. This is OverDrive on TSN 1050 and TSN 4. OverDrive, Jim Tatti and Dave Feschuk with you today and again tomorrow. Some news that, we've got some sound we're going to play. We'll get back to that Ohtani situation. I just want to go over this. And this is from Twitter, and it's a report. Katie Strang has sent this out. Scottsdale Police Department has confirmed to The Athletic that Alex Galchenyuk arrested July 9th on a number of charges, including private property, hit and run, disorderly conduct, failure to obey, resisting arrest, threatening or intimidating, and his contract with the Coyotes was terminated.
12 days after they signed him.
Yeah.
Terminated his deal.
So that's it. That's how fast that can end. We were talking about the Ohtani story, and I did connect the dots because I feel that it's not just a baseball story, it's a sports business story.
Yes.
Just because of who he is, and this contract is going to take him in another direction, and somebody's going to figure out exactly how to make some money off this in a business sense, not just the playing contract, but because of who this guy is. He obviously has world appeal. He's a unicorn as a ball player, the likes we've never seen before. And as I said, the Babe Ruth sample size is very slim from 100 years ago, and it's not nearly on that level. So this is an opportunity for somebody to take this to another level.
Yeah, it really is, Jim. I mean, you're right. This guy isn't just a baseball player. He's not just a pitcher. He's not just a DH. He's not just the unicorn. He is an incredible commodity. Like when you think about, I was looking at some of the sports business stuff about his marketability in Japan, where he is the celebrity of the moment, right? And essentially rules that country. Like I was over there for the Tokyo Olympics, and Ohtani was already, when you walk down the streets in Tokyo, he was already a presence on the billboards of Tokyo, and the young Dundas Square type, video board, Times Square type video board intersections. You saw a lot of Ohtani. You also saw a lot of Ichiro and a lot of, American faces too, like Hollywood type faces. But that was before, this, which is like
this pushes it
another kind of season where he's become the undisputed most powerful weapon in baseball, when he's going to command, as we say, somewhere between maybe 400, maybe 500, maybe 600, and who knows, maybe even more than that, $1 million in free agency. And you have to believe he's going to be doing it in a market, New York, or maybe the big LA Dodgers.
Yeah, Buster Olney on ESPN's Get Up on Ohtani and the Yankees.
If Ohtani is traded before the deadline, what teams would be most likely to go after him?
Well, you start with the Yankees, the Yankees, the Yankees, the Yankees, the Rangers, the Rays. Maybe a small handful of teams, but there's no doubt. You talked with sources yesterday. They see the Yankees as potentially being the most motivated because Garrett Cole, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, they're middle-aged players right in the prime of their careers. This is the Yankees' window to win now. You bring in Ohtani. Suddenly the Yankees rotation with him involved looks so strong. Ohtani hitting in Yankee Stadium, which favors left-handed sluggers. That's something I'm sure the Yankees would be willing to pay for if Ohtani is made available by the Angels.
let's just assume it's the Yankees because from a business sense, I think everybody can understand. Think about how that would play in Japan.
Yeah,
That's huge.
I think it would be huge. I mean, that Yankee cap is iconic in every country, but in Japan, where they love baseball, you see a lot. I mean, having been there in the last couple of years, you definitely see a lot of Yankee caps around Tokyo. So you're right. That would probably add to the appeal that he becomes the king of New York and he's Japanese. I mean, it's mind-boggling the opportunities here. And I'm with Buster. Like when you look at a team that is desperate to win now, that has an aging core, for lack of a better term, and can use both pitching and hitting, New York's right there.